Here to talk to you about superheroes, but specifically kind of the various characters. I've built 2 character universes over the last 20 years, and both of them were in response to tolerance and diversity, accepting people's differences. And I kind of found myself accidentally in this space. It wasn't a plan. It just kind of happened as a reaction to an event that happened in my country of Kuwait, and I'll take you through it in a sec. So I'm a psychologist. This is my clinic. I'm a New York licensed. I'm a hypnotherapist as well. Started this center in 2009. Have also a center for kids who are autistic and have other developmental delays. And found myself in the last 3 years on trial for blasphemy in Kuwait, which I won. Apparently, I believe in God, according to the courts. And just kind of got to, just hit, if you will, the ceiling of where things like this in this region can get to, but thankfully we're actually coming back, and I'll explain to you kind of what happened. But growing up, I'd always read in English, and I write in English because I read in English. And I always had this idea that I didn't like the Arabic language. Didn't like the way it was taught, didn't like anything to do with it, and so I had just given up. And I had this as an idea in my head for a long time. So I read in English, I wrote in English, and my friends would make fun of me. Who are you writing for? The domestic help in Kuwait, haha. And to a certain point, they actually had a point, because back in the early 90s, there was no internet. So when you're writing in English in a small place like Kuwait, your voice isn't really getting heard. And it took the internet to kind of take my voice and spread it outside. So I came home at the age of 25 with this book in English, Cities of Salt. And my mom, who taught philosophy in the Arabic language for 30 years, finally decided to get involved and put her foot down. And she said, "You're Arab, he's Arab, how dare you put a translator between the two of you?" And I said, "No, but," she's like, "enough, you're going to read this book in Arabic." So I said, "Okay." I did, and to my surprise, I actually enjoyed it. And so I read all those books, went on Taha Hussein, Najib Mahfoud, big Arab minds. And the one thing they all had in common is you buy these books like you're doing a drug deal. They're all illegal. They're banned in Kuwait and Saudi and Emirates, etc. They're banned. Okay? And so finally I got to realize it wasn't that I didn't like the Arabic language. It was things that were available in Arabic that would attract somebody who actually wants to think weren't available. And so I went to the next language available where I could be challenged, which was English. And that's why we end up with things like Spider-Man and Superman, right? Because why would people invest in creating content from the region when it just takes a stroke of a pen to ban it? And so in the name of preserving our culture, we end up killing it, right? Saying that we don't want things to come from outside, but we scare people from investing in local content. Even the story of Aladdin, one of the most famous stories ever to come out of our region, who told that story to the world? Was it us? No, it was Disney. And in fact, it started with the following lines. Maybe you won't remember this, but in the 90s, when it first came out, it started with, "Oh, I come from a land from a faraway place where the caravan camels roam, where they cut off your ears if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home." Right? So one of my mentors on the 99 was actually Michael Eisner, who was CEO, chairman of Disney during that time. And over dinner with Michael, he's like, he's like, "Why do people make such a big fuss about this?" I'm like, "Michael, it's derogatory." But anyway, and this is the problem. If we don't tell our story, somebody else will. When somebody else does, you're not going to be the good guy. You're not going to be the hero. Which brings us to the second commandment. So a lot of attention has been drawn the past few years about Islam and cartoons, the Danish cartoon controversy, what happened to Charlie Hebdo, and there's in it is an expression of the second commandment, right? According to Muslims, which follow this idea of kind of not being able to have images because images can be worshipped, right? But how come? But this is also part of Judaism and Christianity. So how come the interpretation of the understanding of that has evolved there, but hasn't really evolved in our part of the world? And I think the reason has to do with language. So for over 1,000 years, the language of religion in Europe was Latin. But like all languages, it evolved with time. And so people started speaking, this what they called vulgar Latin, the Latin of the lower classes, which became French and Italian, those lower class languages. And less people spoke Latin. And because less and less people spoke Latin, the Pope had a monopoly on language and religion and expression, and nobody could challenge what was being said. And so what it took was King Henry, who really wanted that divorce, right? To translate the Bible into English, Martin Luther into German, and Europe woke up. Europe woke up because finally the language they spoke matched the language they thought in, matched the language they wrote in. But we went the other direction in the Arab world. Why? So, in our part of the world, we believe that every prophet came to his people with a miracle. Right? The prophet Moses could turn a stick into a snake because the language of the day was magic. But the prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his miracle was the language in which the Quran came. So if your miracle is language, and language evolves, what do you do? What we did is we came up with all kinds of rules to keep it from moving. And by so doing, we shattered the relationship between thought, language, and the written word. And so our kids end up learning in a language they don't understand. There's not the language of Arabic in school is not the same as language that they speak at home, which gives more and more power to the people who do the religious interpretations. This is a scary statistic. 80% of Muslims don't speak Arabic, and yet they get their advices from people who do. It's the Pope model all over again, right? And what it took to beat the Pope and the Catholic Church in the 1500s was art and culture that was based on the religion, but secular in nature. Right? So, my first expression, I can't draw, my circles look like triangles, but that was my first book. And this book I wrote in my early 20s was a reaction to a man who had been fired from his job because of his religion in Kuwait. And to make matters worse, because that's not bad enough, the guy that fired him gave out leaflets to the community apologizing. Had he known this guy's religion, he wouldn't have hired him to begin with. And I thought, wow. And so I wrote about it in the Kuwait Times for the 5 people that read the paper. And it didn't hit the spot for me, so I wrote and illustrated my first book, To Bounce or Not to Bounce. We go to a land called Bouncy Land where everybody's round. In that society, they judge you based on 2 values, how high you bounce, how fast you roll. That's it. Right? The main character is born as a half circle, can't do either. His parents have all kinds of dreams that get shattered. They have, and at the end, though, after being made fun of, he tries to change himself, doesn't work, but in the end, there's an archetypical flood. And in the flood, the circles can't control themselves anymore. But he's a half circle, he's a boat, so he saves them one by one and forces society to reevaluate the importance of diversity. This book now is in its 4th printing. It's by a Saudi publisher. Book 2 comes out. He goes to a land called Rainbow Land where he expects their acceptance, but they don't give it to him because in Rainbow Land, even though they're all half circles, they judge you according to the color of your bow tie and where it is on the rainbow. So red is better than orange, better than yellow, all the way down to violet, the worst place in society. And they have marriage laws, as any good society might. If you have a red bow tie, you can't marry anybody with a blue ribbon, because what does red and blue give you? Yeah, purple. Last place on the rainbow. Okay? So when he asks them why they live their life in that way, people who do usually put words in God's mouth. But we don't mention God because it's a children's book. So they point up to the sky, to the rainbow, and say it's the natural order of things. To which he points to the reflection of the rainbow on the river and shows them what's on top is now on the bottom. Book 3 got banned. And I quit writing at the age of 27 and came back to them at the age of 32 with my 99. But in book 3, he goes to a land called Thailand, where they wear neckties, not bow ties. And in Thailand, they judge you basically based on, they're huge characters, they're larger than life, and they have this law where they can't buy new ties. They have to wear the ties of their fathers, who wears the tie of his father before him. They go to the place, and for some reason, no one knows why, all these greater-than-life characters, these grandiose people, are now the same size as everybody else. They ain't so special anymore. But because of their laws, their ties are disproportionate to their body size. So when they bounce, their ties get under them. Sorry, when they roll, their ties get under them, make them slow and inefficient. And when they bounce, their ties cover their eyes. They don't know where they're going to land. And those that take off their tie in protest get shunned. So he has to see every tie, he gets every tie in town, every tailor in town, and from the same ties, they cut out the same material, they cut out new ties to better serve their modern day needs. So I get asked point blank at the ministry, this is about the Quran, isn't it? And I said, huh? I said, these books are designed to reflect the thinking of the reader. Clearly, they worked, But you think somebody reading this in Tokyo or in Washington is going to think Quran? It's about tradition and modernity. I wrote this when my wife was pregnant with my first son, Hamid, in '97. So I got banned. I quit writing. I was the angry young man. This is the different stuff from book 2. Skip through it real quick. This is the rainbow. So I went to work at Bellevue Hospital. I did my doctorate in clinical psychology, worked in New York. Half the time was with the survivors of political torture programs. So I had patients coming out of Syrian prisons, Iraqi prisons, because I speak Arabic, but there were people there from all over the world that just didn't speak the other languages. And then the other half the time I spent at the prison. So the 19th floor of Bellevue is actually a prison with a courthouse and a jail, and people who come in who had just committed crimes who we had to psychologically assess before they entered the legal system. There for 2 years, took a break, went to business school. But in the middle of all this, 9/11 happened, and I found myself at a crossroads. I was 30, just turning 30 then, and I didn't know, I knew I wanted to do something, but didn't know what it was that I could do. And so this idea was in the back of my head. The other idea in the back of my head was these patients I saw coming out of Iraq, out of Syria, who'd grown up to see their leaders as heroes, only to be tortured by that hero. And what does it mean when your whole concept of heroism is broken in that way? So just these thoughts, and by then I had my third boy. I have 6 boys now. When I'm in the States, they say, how many kids? I say 6 boys. They say, what about the girls? I say, we don't talk about them. So if I had a girl, I'd tell you. I don't have any girls. That's them. So there's a part of the brain called the mirror neuron, right? And the mirror neuron will reflect things whether you learn them vicariously or you learn them by actually doing them. So some stories from history. Why are stories? In 1954, Roger Bannister became the first man to run a mile in under 4 minutes. When the media covered it, 17 people did the same within 3 years. Okay, that's the power of a story. That's the power of fiction, of nonfiction. But can the same be said about fiction? Right? The Arab Spring, the same thing. One story, it spread. In 1970s, Sesame Street introduced the first African-American couple, or husband and wife, on the street. The reaction came swift from Mississippi. They banned the show. Okay? It took the New York Times to name and shame them for them to bring it back a year later. Cosby has his own issues right now, as we all know, but let's pretend that didn't happen for now. The Cosby Show, still the 3rd most popular show in TV history, changed not only how white America saw black America, it changed how black America saw itself. For the first time, you had dad who was a doctor, mom who was a lawyer, kid who was in college, and it changed perceptions within a community through fiction, right? Who here's watched 24? You guys watched the show 24? Yeah? 24? So it had 2 bad white presidents, right? They lied, they stole, they killed. One of them actually looked and spoke like Richard Nixon. Then they had 2 good black presidents, tall, good-looking, great voices, very ethical. And during the 5th season, America voted in their first African-American president. Did 24 put Obama in power? No, but did it help? I believe it did absolutely, because in a very neutral way, without talking about race, it kind of introduced the idea as juxtaposed against bad leadership, what a good leader was, and it helped. Season 5 also had a bad female president, but that's a different story. So my story with the 99 starts with a cigarette. I don't smoke, I never have. It starts with a cigarette, because when I went to get my wife in Kuwait, they take this herb when they have babies. It's supposed to help with milk production and stuff. And so when I went to buy this herb, in the 2 fingers that the guy was spooning out the herb, in the same 2 fingers the other direction, there was a cigarette he was smoking. And as I was putting the herb in the bag, you don't know how much of it is herb and how much of it is cigarette. And so it got my mind thinking, what if this was kind of a Western branded product? And I was one of the finalists at Columbia Business School. I was doing my MBA to get some money from them to kind of start looking into this as an opportunity. But then the US invades Iraq, 2003. I find myself in a taxi cab in London going from Edgware Road to Harrods, which is a pilgrimage every Kuwaiti makes once a lifetime. And in that cab ride, my sister turned to me and said, Naif, you told me after school you go back to writing, and I'd illustrate. She's actually very talented. And I said, yes, I remember. She goes, what do you think? I was thinking, I just finished 3 master's degrees, my doctorate. Going back to writing for kids just wasn't on my radar. So I wanted her to shut up, but I couldn't say those words because my mother was there. So I said, somehow for me to go back now, it's got to be something that has the potential of Pokemon. I said Pokemon. My next thought was that there was a fatwa against Pokemon. Right? It's not allowed in some parts of the Arab world. My next thought was, my God, what's happened to Islam, and who's making these random decisions for my kids? My next thought was God, and how disappointed he must be. My next thought was that God had 99 attributes in Islam. And by the time I got to Harrods, I came full circle back to Pokemon, a concept of over 1,000 attributes. And I had the aha moment of creating the 99. So I developed my pitch. And this is how it went back in 2003. I said, if you look at the superheroes that exist in the world today, they're based on a Judeo-Christian archetype. So like the prophets, all the superheroes are missing their parents. Batman's parents die when he's 6. Superman's parents send him to other parents on Earth in a pod, very much like Moses was on the Nile. Spider-Man's raised by his own uncle, all of them. And if you go through Hollywood, Simba, Tarzan, it's all the same story. Right? Also, all of them get a message from above delivered through a messenger. The prophets get it from God through Gabriel, but Peter Parker is seeing that photograph, and the spider comes in from above and gives him his message through a bite. Batman sees a bat flying over his head and sees it as an omen to become Batman. And the reason this is done is because there's a Western conspiracy. I'm kidding. Relax. The Bible's known as the greatest story ever told. So there's over 1 billion people who transact in those stories, and so Hollywood builds new stories on an older architecture. So it's exciting because it's new, but it's also familiar because it's tapping into collective unconscious. And so my pitch to my investors is nobody's been doing this with Islam except the bad guys. Let me get in there. I'll take the responsibility. So this is 2003. Baghdad had just fallen. Baghdad fell many times in the past. One of the most famous times it fell was during 1258, when the Mongols invade. All the books of Dar al-Hikmah library are thrown in the tigers. The tigers changes color with ink. I rewrote that story, used it as a pivot for my storylines. So in my version, the librarians are able to create something called the King's Water, which would mix with 99 stones to be able to save all that information in the libraries. But the Mongols get there first. The books and this King's Water get thrown into the Tigris River. The librarians escape and dip the stones into the river and suck up all that information that we think is lost to civilization. That information is what ends up powering these stones, which gives my 99 characters their powers. Now, the 99 is based on the 99 attributes of Allah in the Quran, things like generosity, mercy, foresight, basic human values. Values that we as Muslims share with the rest of humankind. Okay? I was just sick and tired of God being kind of coupled onto the terrorism and stuff like that, and not enough was being done in the other direction. And so this, some of the characters, our characters are from Saudi, the US, China, Iran. We put a Saudi superhero and an Iranian superhero on American television, which was a lot of fun. Indonesian, half of them are boys, half are girls. The girls, some of the girls wear the hijab, some don't, one wears the niqab. So, but we never talk about religion in the storylines. Nobody ever prays, nobody mentions the Quran or God or the Prophet, nothing, just basic human values. We got very lucky in the media, got covered by thousands of articles, and I'll tell you the quick story on this. I was here in Dubai at an Arab Thought Foundation meeting. I met a reporter from the New York Times. I pitched him, and I think I scared him because he wanted me to go away. But he promised a paragraph from the New York Times, which was a big deal for me then. So I called him a month later, I said, Happy New Year, I said, thanks, we had a baby, I said, congratulations. The article, he said, Naif, Islam and cartoon is not timely. Maybe next month, maybe 6 months, maybe in a year, who knows? I give up. 2 days later, the world explodes in the Danish cartoon controversy. I became timely, by luck. So they start chasing me, and they cover me in a full page in the Sunday Times on January 22nd, 2006, which changes my life forever. Because anybody searching Islam and cartoon or Islam and comic, guess what they got? They got me. Okay? Thousands and thousands of articles, which led to a bunch of stuff for us. We were able to raise our second round of financing. Our first round, we actually raised $7 million. Our second, we raised 15. Opened a theme park in Kuwait. The comic book series came out over 12 languages, some licensing deals in Europe. But the most important thing we did was a TV show, which we'll show you a quick clip from. Can we just play 30 seconds from the clip, please? You have to use your imagination and pretend it's there. Is it difficult to do? Here we go. Nothing showing. You know what? No need. No need. Excuse me? Just go to the next slide. No need. No need. It's online. It's on YouTube. The whole series. I'll send you the link. So can I get control over this again? There we go. So the TV show came out all over the world. Came out on Cartoon Network in China, in Mandarin, in Thai. Came out in Australia. The US, we had an interesting story, which I'll share with you in a bit. Came out throughout the region here, some places in South America, and became the first IP from the region to actually go global. One of the fun things I got to do, so on January 1st, 2009, my fifth son, Rakan, was born. And when I got a call from my dad, and he said, I want you to call him Barack. Barack. And I said, no. Obama's going to be president in 20 days. And then I hang up, somebody else calls, they said, boy or girl? I said, what do you think? They said, now we have enough boys to liberate Palestine. I was thinking, what happened to playing basketball, right? And so I took these two thoughts and wove them into an op-ed called Naif Al-Mutawa, about why I would not name my son Barack. Who publishes this? The Chicago Tribune, so the New York Times of Illinois. When did they publish it? On January 20th, the day the president becomes president. What page? On the op-ed pages, so you know he read it, right? Same day, Marvel releases a copy of Spider-Man with Obama on the cover. Signal to the world that Obama likes comic books. I had no idea. But more importantly, my friend Paul Levitz, who was running DC Comics, had no idea. So I went to Paul, flew to New York, had lunch with him in February, and I said, Paul, Marvel beat you. He said, yes, I know. We've been talking about it in the office. We don't know how to respond. I said, I know how to respond. I said, how about when Obama reaches out to the Muslim world, which eventually became the speech from Cairo 4 months later, how about when he does that, the 99 reach back out to the Justice League? Not expecting he'd do it. The last time DC Comics agreed to this was with Marvel 15 years before, where they allowed Batman and Superman to be in the same universe as Spider-Man, X-Men, etc. He loved it. So we announced the deal within a few months, and 6 books came out, which sold out. They're available as downloads only now. But this led to a lot of criticism and a lot of praise. One of them, is the second video available to play or no? Yeah, you sure? Let's try the second video. So this is what the books came out, looked at. So that's my characters with Batman, Superman, and a Wonder Woman who found her clothes in the closet after 70 years of looking. They were there, she just couldn't see them. With a jacket as well. The video, please? Here we go. Same issue? No, they did it, not me. If it's not going to work, tell me, because the time is short here. Just take me back to my presentation. It's okay. We can do the surgery later. Take me back to the presentation, please. So basically what happened is that in April 2010, President Obama gave a 14-minute speech, and 2 minutes of it was about the 99, which was amazing, and I would not trade that moment for anything in my life, but it completely changed my life again, because all of a sudden, what happened was, we got huge criticism in the US from the right wing. Obama's Muslim, and this proves it. He's trying to brainwash your children using Sharia as superheroes. Anybody watching the show will become a jihadi. My favorite criticism from, I'm sure, Trump voters now was, we can't let those Muslims brainwash our children like the Mexicans did with Dora the Explorer. This happened. It's funny, but this happened, right? Meanwhile, here, I also got attacked. I became a Zionist, you name it, I was it. So the right wing in both places came after me. But here was a bit more serious. Here it started with a call for my trial in 2013. The hashtag was trial for me, and they would also hashtag different people from the Saudi Scholar Council, the head guys who give the religious edicts in Saudi. This leads to this lawyer suing me in Kuwait, saying we have to stop the 99 before it comes out. But it had come out 2 years prior and was on TV every day, but whatever. So he gets ignored by the government. So then he asks for a fatwa. He gets it from Saudi, all 7 sign it. What the sheikhs say in the fatwa is actually correct. They said nothing wrong. The problem is what a fatwa is, just to understand, a fatwa is the answer to a question without doing due diligence on the question. So if somebody wants to lie in the question, then the sheikh is going to answer based on the question. They don't go and check. And so what the sheikh said is right. The information given to him was all wrong. Okay? That led to, in June, he sues me again, same guy. This time I get a call from a remote police station in Kuwait, calling me in for questioning, I wasn't very happy. But then what happened with this, he gets another fatwa, this time from Kuwait. And then it becomes a free-for-all. My mother finds out about the death threats on my life from the front page of the newspapers. Gave me 3 days to live 3 years ago, so their math is off. But basically, it went out of control. And this is a selfie outside the police station when I did my interrogation. And when I got asked during the interrogation, said, you were accused of insulting God, what do you have to say? I laughed. Partly because it was stressful, and partly because I said, I'm insulting God. What other project in the last 10 years has been showing Islam and the positive values outside of my work? But I still went through the trial. After the first trial, the judge recused himself. Somebody was trying to pressure him. I went through the trial again, came out not guilty. But it kind of took the life out of the project for a while, but I'll tell you how it's coming back. So how do I respond? I have this book coming out in Saudi soon. I went back to my original storylines of the circles. And in this version of the story, basically we go to a land, a prequel, where they're all circles. They never found a triangle. And then one of them, as he's rolling around, hits a few triangles. He's like, ouch, what's this? So they have a meeting, and they decide all the boys would wear the triangles on their chins, and all the girls would wear the triangles on their heads. Okay? And so After a while, some of them are not happy. They start to itch. They don't want to live their life that way, so they take off their triangles, and they play around with them and realize that by putting triangles together, they can make the bow ties and the ribbons. So all's good. And then, again, there's a problem. So they make a line in the sand, so all the people who want to do the bow tie ribbon thing live in the west. Okay? And all the ones that want to do it on their chin and head live to the east of the line. So they're all okay now, but now each generation has kids who want to be like the other side. So the Westerners want to be like Easterners, and the Easterners want to be like Westerners. So this time, they say, no, no, no. So they meet each other. They say, no, no. So they take away the triangles, which is basically a symbol for religion and culture and tradition, and from that, they make their weapons, using religion for war. They go to war, and then they realize it doesn't stop anything, because every generation has somebody who wants to be like somebody on the other side. And they get together and decide to, from the same triangles, create slides for entertainment, rooftops for security, and pyramids for culture. And together, East and West move forward in a journey of peace. So that's how I replied. And when they say, what are you going to do if somebody comes after you with death threats and fatwas? Draw circles and triangles. I mean, what else are you going to do? How many of you have read The Catcher in the Rye? How many of you have killed in the name of that book? No, there's usually one person in the audience that's killed in the name of this book. So in 1980, Mark David Chapman shot and killed John Lennon with a copy of this book in his hand, told police the book drove him to kill. And a year later, Hinckley tried to kill President Reagan. He too referred to the same book. So whose fault is that? The book or the deranged lunatic who pulled out his own messaging? Right? On some very basic level, what's happening in the name of our culture and religion has nothing to do with the religion. It has to do with these interpretations. Pokemon on the cover there that I have on my office, hoping that one day the 99 would get there. We made one of the last issues of Newsweek before Newsweek became digital in Pakistan, where we made the cover. And when you compare that to how Islam usually is framed on the covers of magazines, you can see that this project has taken us a long way. And I don't have much time, but happy to take a few questions. Thank you very much. Any questions? Who's sending me regards? Oh, say hello to him. Say hello to him. I spoke at his school a few years ago. Yeah. Any questions from anybody? Yes. What's next? Thank you. I forgot to say. So we just got approached by a venture capitalist out of Canada who heard me speak in Dubai. Dubai is part of every story. 2 years ago at the YPO conference, and basically he owns a gaming company in Canada. We just signed a deal with him. So there's going to be a new season of the 99. A new game and some comic books, but coming out of Vancouver. So our IP, the investors actually moved it out. It's actually owned by a US-based company now, which will be licensing to Canada. So it's all good. Us will get probably the heat here, but the company will be over there. Yeah, so that's what's happening. But we've been silent for 3 years. Like I've been, busy in the clinic, repositioning myself in mental health. Question? Yes. So good question. So there is no religious value in the books. So outside of, it's very much value-based, so cooperation, respect to people's differences, diversity, stuff like that. So the earlier books, the bouncy books, those, it's whatever you put into it, you take out of it. So when I talk to kids about these books in schools, if they're young, they say, well, people make fun of you, if your shoes aren't the latest shoes, right? Or if you wear glasses, right? But as you get older, well, it'll be about religion and your skin color. And so it depends on, it's a reflection of what's going on for the kid. But those are, the 99 is used in some schools, but those other ones are used in quite a few schools. Any questions? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. So on Twitter and Instagram, it's Dr. Naif, DrNaif, and my email is my first name at my last name.com, so naif@almutawa.com. Thank you very much.